everyone, and welcome to this week's show. I am super excited to introduce to you my dear friend, Kristy Mandour. Kristy is an energy leadership and mindset coach that works with high achievers to get them out of their heads and back into the work that lights them up. She is somebody I met now, I want to say about 6 months ago, and have been just fascinated with the work she does. And so I've asked her to come on the show and talk not only about the kind of coaching she does, but a lot of the topics that both of us at midlife moms are dealing with in real time, both with ourselves, our own lives, and the clients that we serve. So without further ado, Kristy, welcome to the show. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, Michelle, thank you so much. I'm so excited we get to sit here with tea and gab for an hour.
I know, I know. So, okay, I have to start where
Yes.
I start with all my guests, and that is, Kristy, what does it mean to you to live your extraordinary life?
I was giving this some thought and I'm such a word nerd that I of course went into where did extraordinary come from? And I did a little research on what does it mean instead of what we all think it means, which is really different and special, and we can get so swept up in that. Like we don't want to live an ordinary life. We want to live super unusual. And it does come from that. But when I think about what does it mean? It means to live a life that is true to you.
Mm,
Period.
You're speaking my language. I mean, for me, it's the same. I talk about really when you come back home to yourself, when you were at your most authentic, that is your superpower. That is where all of magic starts when you can come back home to yourself, live a life that's true to you because you know who you are, you know what you want, and you're not afraid to live it. That to me is extraordinary because it's so rare. It's rare that you find people that are willing to step out of the fray, out of the rest of what society is doing, of what we're told, and often go against the grain and want what they want. How have you experienced this with your own clients, Christy? I'm curious because you do so much with high achievers, with leaders, with entrepreneurs. When you start to work with them, do you find that they're already in a path that lights them up? Or I suspect you're getting people that are heart centered, well intentioned, but often overthinking what needs to happen. So, are they living their most authentic lives? How do you help them? What comes up in those early conversations?
It's so great. Yeah. So 100% they are though through line because I work with men and women. I work with creatives, entrepreneurs, and leaders, traditional leaders, although I think we're all leaders in our own right. The through line is that heart centered piece. The through line is that they're high achievers. They can be very hard on themselves. And the through line is they tend to overthink. So what I sense is that they know they're not living their most authentic life. They want to, and they don't. I don't even know if it's that they don't know how to, because I believe we all know how to. It's almost like they need the space and they are wanting the space to be honest about what an authentic life looks like to them and then let it settle for a second. Just to let it drop to go, okay, I just said it out loud. Now what? And I pride myself on creating such an incredible space for clients because, listen, I've made many mistakes in my life that I wince at. I always say it's like a cringy moment. You have to gross yourself out to grow. Like, oh, did I really do that? And so I'm kind of like, bring whatever you got. Like, I'm going to, whatever you have will not make me blanch. I mean, that is one of the benefits of being a rebellious spirit is that you make some reckless choices. You do some things you aren't proud of. And what most people bring in is like nothing. So, and I mean nothing in the sense that it's not anything that is so jarring. And so I feel like there is this sense of longing and this sense of knowing. So they come to me to share the longing and uncover the knowing.
I wonder if for most people, it's not only identifying it, because I do think we all ultimately know, even though it's,
Mhm.
I was very much culpable in my earlier days of saying, I don't really know. And, a coach pushed me and said, yeah, you do. So we might
Yes.
have to uncover it, but we all know. It's a matter of like sitting with it. Is it not just being able to articulate what it is, but also giving ourselves the permission to want it? Because I remember early on being able to articulate it and then going, but it's not the image that my fill in the blank family held for me of what I would do. And that was deeply concerning. Like it wasn't, even though I was an adult at that point and out of the house and on my own and self sufficient, there was still this sense of wanting approval from the people I loved, from the people around me to want the life that I wanted versus the high power career that they all intended for me, which ultimately still happened. So there's more to talk here, Christy.
So are
Permission,
you
big one. Permission, I think, is a big one, right?
Yeah, and so I was wondering what you were asking. Yeah, I feel like it is complex because yes, permission and what we're giving ourselves permission to is so personal to all of us. There are a lot of things that come up with the clients that I work with, and I agree with you 100% that we do know. That's why it's so important to find support where you can share it and stay put versus share it and then busy yourself mentally, physically, numb out, however we do it.
Mm,
Sharing it with someone who will hold you accountable to really, I always say, like, coaching is 100% unbiased perspective and 100% concern and care. And it's like, what an awesome combo if you can find that, because it's wonderful if you have loved ones who you share with, but they have a vested interest in you. They care about you. And so their response to you is going to be different, right? So it is permission, it is uncovering the knowing. What I noticed with specifically clients that I work with is that there is a myth, an urban myth, I'll say, that we have all bought into if you have a tendency to overthink. If you're someone who says, yes, I'm in that camp, there is a tendency, sure, it can be habit, but if you dig deeper, there is a deep rooted sense of a good person will overthink. If I'm not thinking about this, I'm not a good person. I'm selfish. I'm not concerned. Worry is equated to thoughtfulness, and it's such BS. That's not even the same energy level. Concern and thoughtfulness and worry are like totally different scales. So I unpack that with them in a way that merges creativity with science. So the science piece is really helpful because it allows them to feel like, oh, this is how we're wired. We're wired with fight or flight for a reason. And we're all, so many people have a tendency to go into this style of thinking for a reason. And it's really advantageous for a reason. And now you're noticing that it's not. And so it creates a bit of a space. And so we hear hold the space often in coaching, right? So it's about holding the space and creating that energetic space for them to feel held and safe and grounded. It's also about giving them internal space to see their thoughts from a more objective perspective than feeling like they are their thoughts. So a part of them may feel like, if I don't think about this, if I actually voice what I want and I don't think about all the effects it's going to have on other people, because of course we want to pay attention to what we do and how it affects the people that we care about. But there's a limit to that, right? It's like there it's not mutually exclusive to be authentic and to be connected to people. Like sometimes we feel like it's one or the other. Either I'm going to be living my authentic life and on an island disconnected, or I'm going to be connected, but then I have to sacrifice myself. And it's so not true. So going back to the space, I give that space so that they can realize like a part of them is feeling whatever it is. A part of them is. And 9 times out of 10, when they pull back and they see that part of themselves like a movie character almost, Their self-compassion is instant because I want to share an example. So I had one client recently who is such a high achiever, so heart-centered, moving up in her organization, excited about it, nervous about it, and feeling like she's never doing enough, like so many of us. And so we started playing around. We didn't get so deep yet, but started playing around with the idea of like, let's redefine what enough is, because that's not up for grabs. I always say like, who you are isn't up for grabs, it's up to you. And so many of us have given it up for grabs. And when you stop and go, what does enough mean? Oh, wait, there actually can be enough that I feel. So that brings in a somatic piece of embodied self awareness to know physically what it feels like for enough, which is another segue we can get into. But she was feeling like that. And we were talking about it being like a runaway train. She's jumping on, she's getting off for a second and then running, trying to like jump back on. And there's literally no end, there's no destination. And so when we pulled back and she shared a situation in her life where she was like trying to fit everything in and she was talking about exercising, like even exercising, I'm trying to fit in. When she pulled back and saw that girl, that woman, but really a girl, like on that literal treadmill and figurative treadmill, she was like, oh my gosh, I feel so sad for her. But when I'm in it, I feel like I got to do it. Like I'm got to do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
I can't. So for her to be able to pull back, she was given an opportunity for herself to instantly have self compassion. Like that is self compassion. So I think that's I feel like that's a very long-winded answer to your question, but I feel like that is an intricate part of the work that I do. If you really unpack it and peel it back, it is allowing people to feel and understand self-compassion in a way that is sustainable and accessible.
Let's talk about the energy portion of the coaching that you do, because I am very interested in understanding better how you're using it, what kind of modalities you're bringing into play, what it all means. We talk a lot about the energy that people bring to any situation they're at. So, you are energy. We all know that we are energy. And so it's palpable. You know where somebody's at based on how they're showing up. I know that when my kid walks through the door from school, what's gone on that day is pretty easy to read based on his energy, right? Is he drained? Is he happy? Is he excited? Is he relaxed? Or is he frustrated? And I'm curious from a coaching perspective, where are you in terms of using energy modalities to help people be better aware of how they show up and better able to recalibrate or calibrate for that matter where their energy is in any given moment to get back to this place of what I would say is like homeostasis, a sort of peaceful state that's neither, hijacked on one end or the other, that's really at a place of peace. How are you using energy?
Where do we start, Michelle? There's so much in what you just said. I'm like, I was just about to start. I'm like, no, but it could. So it is my initial is creating a framework so that they can grasp it. Because energy is, we get it, we understand it to a degree, but it can be very like, woo goo, just eh. And so I bring in science so much. I feel like it's where it intersects. It's science and there is also a spiritual element to it inherently because we're all made up of this stuff, right? So I immediately go to science. I immediately start talking about, and I share, this is one of the first exercises I'll have people do. I'll say, what are you thinking right now? And they'll go, I have no idea. I was like, well, pause for a second. Like, you can pause and check in. And so many of us, myself included, will rush through and not pay attention to our thoughts because we don't want to pay attention to our thoughts. Because going back to what you were saying before, when we pay attention to our thoughts, it is telling us what we want or what we don't want. And then we have to face that, like, oh my gosh, we're betraying ourselves, but I'm just going to keep going fast because I don't want to think about how inconvenient it could be if I really pay attention. So it's a very complex conversation, right? It's not like one band-aid over it. But the energy piece is I ask them what they're thinking. And then I ask them, where are you feeling it in your body?
Mhm.
And first, a lot of them are like, "What the hell are you talking about?" And I was like, "I get it. This may feel so bizarre. Just play with it. Look," and I always go back to experiment. I say, like, look at it like an experiment. Like, what is your thought right now? And it might be now, like, what the heck is she talking about? And notice where you're feeling it. And so that immediately connects instantly their realization that our mind is connected to our body. And it's not just a bobblehead that so many of us feel that is just kind of moving through life, floating, right? And so and we're charged. We are so charged, just like energy, just like battery. However, we're either overcharged or we are depleted or we need to recharge. It's like, so I connect it to things too for people to understand. And to be honest, the visualization cues are one of my most popular because people get it. So connecting it to a cell phone, iPhone, a computer, talking about energy with what you're sensing, like when you notice in your body what you're thinking. So whether it's an anxious thought or it's an exciting thought, some people might go, "Oh, I'm sensing this." All right, well, if you had to give it a shape, what would it be? Sometimes it's like, "Oh my gosh, it's like tons of balloons, like just rising up and awesome." And so now what they have is they have a feel in their body that they want to keep if it's a joyful feeling. So I call that seal the feel. And now they have a visual. So now it's like a double. They think of all these balloons and they also can feel it in a specific place in their body. So when the inevitable anxiety pops up, they know what it feels like to feel that joy and they can access it more. But if you don't seal it in, then you're just, it's like anything, like whatever you practice grows stronger. So if
Right.
you're only practicing feeling anxious, that's what I was thinking about when you were talking about homeostasis. Like, yes, homeostasis. And if you're someone who tends to overthink and run very anxious, your system's going to think homeostasis is anxious.
A place of anxiety, right.
You know what I mean? And so it's like, that's where the part work comes in. So that's where, and it comes in many different ways. But when I say the part work, just for your listeners to understand, I personify emotions, I personify characters, like energy levels. What I go through are the 7 levels of energy, very in line with the chakra system for anybody who's familiar with that. And each level is personified. So they create a character for each level. And when they can do that, there is more of a sense of not just self compassion, it's also like I call it the personification posse because you feel less alone. So when you're in a state of anxiety, if you've already gone through the work of noticing that a part of you feels anxious, it's not like all of you is anxious, even if it feels that way. There is a part of you that is anxious. If you can give it a name like anxious Annie or anxious Andy, and you go, okay, anxious Andy, it gives you enough space to realize that there might be this being that you created, whether it be a human or a shape or whatever, shaking, and maybe it's red. And I had one client who did like clusters of red, like shaking, like they're all clustered together. I promise you, you immediately have self compassion for that part of yourself. And you just feel, oh, honey, there's just this sense of, oh, honey, oh my gosh, I so see you. And you might cry. And I mean, I feel like I can cry right now because of that instant sense of, "Ah, I don't want you to feel that way. I don't want you I wanna support you." And so now that's part of you. It's really, really powerful.
Yeah. I'm curious in terms of actually tapping into that once you
Mhm.
seal the feel and being able to go back to that because it is a remembrance. I know what that felt like. I know what peace feels like. I know what feeling good feels like and I can tap into it. How quickly do you find that people are able to get back there if they're in a state of anxiety, in a state of frustration, in a state of can they, with training or on their own, get back to that space instantaneously? How are you helping to coach them into tapping into that feeling that they've sealed?
Yeah, so many different ways because no one's the same. Speaking of extraordinary lives, we're all our unusual beings in the best way possible. And So there are many different practices. I love offering people not too many choices, but enough choices that they can then choose. Right? They can say, I need this right now, or I'm on a Zoom and I really can't do anything other than stay here. But I feel like whether it's a job interview, a pitch to a client, a podcast interview, you get thrown a question, you start getting anxious. You're not going to run out in the hallway and do 10 jumping jacks. Like
Right.
you could say, hold on, and it would make a very
I'll be right
interesting,
back.
it would make a very interesting situation. But so in those situations, we'll practice things like that are under the Zoom meridian. Like I always say, wear ankle weights, ground your feet down, like tickle them, and then just that gives your mind immediate focus to your feet, which is grounded, or wear a weighted blanket. That is a total aside off of what you were asking, but I just wanted to share that because it's so small and people often make it like big. You can do small things and you will be shocked at the impact it has. But when it comes to people coming back from Steal the Feel, so what we'll do is either take an actual situation that just happened where they're like, I'm so excited, this just happened. Or I'll have them recall a situation that they were excited about, joyful about, any of the upper energy levels. And I'll walk them through a guided meditation of their five senses. And
Mm,
the senses immediate I mean, and it's so simple. We all know what 5 senses are. We have them with us all the time, and they go through and they get themselves into that space. And then at the end, I say, "Where are you what's standing out to you the most in your body? What body part is standing out to you the most?" This My chest. Okay, within your chest, what is the sensation? And that is the differentiator because feelings or emotions. Sensations are what we really that's the energy too, right? So we want to be able to go like, I'm feeling joyful. I'm sensing that sensation of joy is that I feel electric. Everybody's felt that, right? I feel grounded, but I also feel buoyant. I feel expansive. My face feels like if it just feels like alive. Like I can feel it's like giggling, like the cells in my body are giggling. And so, okay, so seal that in. So then they inhale. And when they exhale, I have them exhale and it's an expansive breath out so that it is staying within the circular of their body. And then they're able to seal it because I end it with saying, take like a mental screenshot of that. Like, and then it's practice. So it sounds so boring because we hear it all the time, but I say so consistently, and so many other people say this too, is like oral care and mental care are equally important. You would not stop brushing your teeth ever because it's gross on many levels. So mental care is equally important as oral care. So it's practice. And once you practice it enough, it just becomes like brushing your teeth. It's just what you do. You don't think it's just what you do. Right. And so the more you practice it, the easier it becomes. Now, what really does seal it is this idea of what's the benefit. Once people understand, so we kind of reverse engineer it. Like once people understand the intention and the benefit of practicing this, that's another in the bucket of really like sealing it in, right? Like, oh, this is going to matter long term. It's changing the trajectory of my generation. Awesome. It's making my life better in the future. Awesome. I just heard something recently that I loved from, I don't have her book here. I was going to show it. I believe her name's Jamie Varon. Radically Content is the book. And she shared this one idea that I had never heard of, or I never heard of it like this. And I loved it. And I shared it with my whole crew of girlfriends. I was like, you guys, and all of them were like, goosebumps. This is crazy. And it was this. So often we hear about future self. I'm thinking your audience is probably very aware of that phrase, right?
yes.
So we talked to, I mean, the way I look at it is whenever I'm talking to my future self, and I never thought about it until what I'm about to share with you, it was this idea of like looking to her for guidance. And she's this radiant, luminous, beautiful being, and she's almost ageless, but she's me. And oh my gosh. And I look to her for guidance. And what was in this book was the idea of what can you do now to support her and make her life easier in the future? And I was like, what? how have I never thought of that? Like, how have I never thought of the idea that, and it gave me so much more agency and a feeling of like supporting her. I was like, oh, this is a mutually supportive relationship. I thought she was the one who had all the strength. And I was like, and the high achievers, like, we like to
And
be productive.
I'm
We want
like
to go somewhere.
asking to that, yeah, future self. And instead you're really making the deposits into self.
100%. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. So I felt like that was very powerful. And I actually shared that with, we've talked so much about how we both work with men too, and we love that. And I did it with a male client who's going through a really tough time. And he's very left brain. He's in tech and he's like, that resonated. I get that. What can I do to make, because when you're in a tough spot, we all know that. Sometimes it is heavy, bleak, black. There you can't see any future self. But if you realize you can actually do something now here to like start creating a lightness to that darkness, it's beautiful. I it's into and it's a wonderful prompt to journal on. What
I
can I
love
do
that.
today? Yeah, it's really beautiful.
Let's just kind of think about that for a minute for our listeners. So a journal prompt around this could be, what is it I'm doing now? Consciously deciding to do now that will help my future self. So it's an activity, it's a thought, it's a feeling that will help to empower this future self. I just love that. I one that's really big for me, and I think it's because I've had a very long corporate career where things were heavy and a lot of motion. I did a lot of issues and crisis work. So things were often like quick and moving at like, the speed of light. Expansiveness is really important to me. Usually because I was in a small, so like the windowless conference room half my career or more. But this idea of expansiveness and practicing expansiveness for my future self. What
Mm,
does it feel like? And can I hold that for her? Because I want that. I feel that greatly when I travel. One of the benefits for me when I like my sister and I are very, very close, but we have incredibly opposite experiences around travel. When I say we're going to Greece, I'm so excited. I feel so free when I go there. I feel so expansive when I travel overseas. And she goes, and here I am with my central nervous system going high alert. This is painful in some ways to me because it fills me with anxiety to get out of my routine into this spaciousness. I'd
mm.
rather coon closer to home. And so we have very different experiences around travel and around what vacations should look like. And but for me, it is the further I go, the more I travel, the more I quite honestly, going back to one of the earlier points you made around the importance of connection. I think we are relational beings, so we crave connection with one another. And yet, one of the most authentic things that comes up for me is to claim this space and just allow myself to be in it and experience this sense of expansion when I go overseas. And it's interesting because one would say, well, why can't you do that here? That is a really good question. But it's often something I associate with leaving behind the daily routine and stepping into a new world or a new experience. So, yeah, so I love that idea though for really creating that investment in your future self and allowing some of these activities that you're doing now, some of these conscious decisions we're making to be not just for this current moment, but for the future self. That's that I get a lot. It resonates deeply.
There's so much with what you just said. Can we go forward? Can I, like, go back and use you as an
Yeah,
example to expand on this?
absolutely.
Because you shared so much just now, which extends on your question of what I do energy-wise. Like, you just nailed on so many pieces of it, right? So, first of
Oh,
all, you noticed what you focus on, which is expansion. Right now, that's like a big thing for you. And it might always be, like, who knows? And right away, you knew what gives you that feeling. When you think of traveling, that gives you that feeling. So when we go through the seven levels of energy, what we go through is also what are the situations or people who, when you are around or in, that you experience this energy level. Because if you don't know, how are you going to shift anything? I mean, it really, at the end of the day, is waking up. It's paying more attention of how you can be more conscious than in default mode, and also being kind to yourself that do it teeny tiny. It doesn't have to be huge. So, one of the super creative ways, if I was working with you and you were feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to travel for a while because I have work or whatever's happening. And you're like, but I love traveling. We would go through like, what was one of your favorite places to go? What was one of your, and we would go through all the senses. We would let you give you the opportunity to seal in the feel. And then what I probably would give you as an exercise is to find like a beautiful piece of instrumental music that's your favorite. I love instrumental music because it has been shown to also enhance our energy. It's all, it's all energy. And it also has a built-in timer. When that song's done, you're done. So there's no beep beep, there's no like jarring. Sometimes timers can be a little jarring. So you find a beautiful piece of music. I love Brooklyn Duo. I want to drop that in for your clients. They are a phenomenal duo, obviously, a cellist and a pianist, and they play pop. They play all different genres of music, and they're fantastic. You can find them on YouTube or whatever listening platform that you like. And so you would listen to it for 3 minutes, maybe 3 times a week. And while you did it, or if it was an instrumental piece of music that reminded you of this beautiful traveling memory, and you would just sit and bask in it. And then you would come back into your world from that place, from that lens. And you would notice if you plummeted again, like, oh, here I am. And it takes practice to go, that's okay too. It's okay if you just plummeted from like heaven, nirvana in your mind, and then you were like, "Oh, and I'm here." We so often do these exercises and then we shame ourselves for like getting out, like energetically or emotionally get dropping out of it so quick, like, oh, but I shouldn't feel guilty because there's so many things and then we're on a runaway mental quicksand. So it's noticing and going, both can be true. I can feel so invigorated and expansive with the idea of traveling to, you know, Napa Valley or to Seville or wherever. And I could also feel a little blah about being here right now. Both can be true. And the more you allow that to be true, the blah actually has less weight because you're not repressing it or suppressing it or pushing it. You're just acknowledging it. And then again, if we continued on, we would create a blah personificated character. Like when blah pops up, how do you handle blah? What does blah really want? Maybe blah just wants 15 minutes of like looking at Pinterest and making a Pinterest travel private board so that you can collect all the pictures. Maybe that's it. I mean, but it's more about you knowing, going back to that, what you want and need to give that part of yourself.
It's really interesting because I'm actually, as you're talking, and I'm thinking about what is it about travel that makes me feel expansion. I think it's because I've assigned that when I travel, I can temporarily put on hold my daily life and allow for endless possibilities of new experiences to be had. I don't have a foregone conclusion of what's going to happen on a trip. We usually don't script them out very well, like loosely. Here are the places we want to go and things we'd like to experience.
Sure.
But mostly, we're meeting people. We're having conversations we wouldn't have otherwise had because we are outside of our daily experience. It is very extraordinary. It is the sense of limitless possibilities. And I found for me, one of the reasons why it's sort of like something I have to do every year. Like when I don't, it's not a great year. 2020 is rough. But getting back to it, because it's in that space that I get downloads of new things I want to experience, new things I want to try. Um, Stepping outside of where I am and imagining that future state and trying it on when I'm in some other place, it doesn't matter. I can be imagining that I'm already there because I don't have the responsibilities of the day to day to tie me down to a
Yes.
thought process. And so it's incredibly freeing. So it's so interesting to me that here is my sister. Biologically, we're very connected in DNA. And yet our experience around travel and what it means and how we feel about it, night and day, night and day experiences. I'm like, oh, this is my sanctuary. Is
Yes.
put me wherever in the world to explore. And she's like, oh my God, just get me home.
But that's exactly
Morning and home.
but that's the whole point. The point is that we are so interconnected and we all have our own unique footprint too. So the more that you can understand what lights you up uniquely to you, the more you'll be able to dip into it. Like, of course, you would want to travel to whatever there's something very invigorating too of like and exciting and adventurous to make like your list of the where you want to travel. And then you can make mini mood boards for each place. Like that's still going to keep a pulse to like keep it going. Right. And it reminds me, and I love this because I know you just started, I think it was like Reset Rios on
Yes.
Instagram, right? So
Yeah.
great. Little plug for you on that. Instagram lives daily or weekly.
Weekly, Mondays.
Weekly, not daily. That was my miss. That was my miss. However, there is an exercise that I do that I want to share with your listeners that's really fun and they can get as in depth as they want with it. So it's called the reset folder, which is what made me think of it. So, and run with it for your Instagram live because it's so fun and it's like, it's creative and it's love and it's inspiring and it's peace and it's all the things. Okay. So it's so ridiculously simple. You create in your phone, you could do an actual in a folder, it doesn't matter. You create a reset folder and you can start it off by dedicating like anywhere from 15 minutes on, however long you have, to like think about what are the things that light you up in travel, music, movies, nature, like the core ones, right? Like you can even go to your emotions. When do you feel the most excitement, the most love, the most peace? And just write down what they are. And then in your reset folder, that's why it's helpful on your computer. You can put pictures, memories from those times. You can put links to the songs. You can put links to movie clips or TV shows. I mean, there's so much you can do within that. And depending on how much time you have, and now all of a sudden you're going to be in the car. I love when this happens. Like if I forget my phone at home and then I listen to the radio because who does it anymore? And I put it on and I actually get excited when the radio comes on because I'm like, what song am I supposed to hear right now? you know?
Love
And
it.
then you might hear a song from when you were a kid. Like I heard Casey Kasem's Countdown the other day and I was like, oh, I love Casey Kasem's voice. Casey Kasem is like a higher level, peaceful love vibe for me. So I put Casey Kasem on my reset list. And here's what happens. We all know this if you're Gen X or older. You do not even have to hear his voice. All you need to do is see his name and you hear his voice.
Hear
And
it.
it is such an uplift. It is such an uplift. So, in those moments when you're going moment to moment, meeting to meeting, transitioning from professional to personal life, feeling blah, whatever, those are not the times when you're going to be able to conjure up what lights you up. You don't have that capacity. So, you already have this made. So all you have to do is remember to go, oh, my reset list. And then it sparks an excitement because then from that point, you're also tapping into your intuition. You get to choose as you go down, like which one do you need right now the most?
Mm.
It's so fun.
I cannot wait for Monday now. Okay, Christy, you're gonna have to and work with me on this one.
It's
Right.
so and I just wanna add one last thing, and it's so intricate, but people love it who are very systems oriented. I also had a client take her reset list and divide it into time brackets. So, like, she did one because she wanted to. She was like, "But what about when I'm going from meeting to meeting?" I go, "You're gonna take all of your reset stuff, and you're gonna put 1 under 30 seconds, 1 bucket for 5 minutes, 1 bucket for 10 minutes, 1 bucket for 15 minutes, 30 minutes or more." So when she's going Zoom to Zoom to Zoom and she's like, "Oh my gosh, my mind's about to explode," she takes out a reset folder and she looks at the like 1 minute or less, and it might be a picture of her dog. And she's like, "Oh, okay." And then she shifts. It's so cool.
I love this. I love
Yeah.
the whole idea. All right. This is a topic near and dear to my heart. So I hope you'll play with me for a
Mhm.
bit. The midlife reset, the midlife reinvention, this next
Yes.
chapter of thinking that I know you and I have, we're in, we've been part of. I love holding the space because for many, many years, would hear people say, if you haven't figured it out by 30, right, it's too late or what have you. And I kind of laugh now and realize who said it? Was it Carl Jung who said everything before 40 was just research? Pretty sure it was
Oh, I love it. I think it was him too. It's so great.
everything before 40 is just research, people. Like,
Oh, it was so cool.
relax. We are
Yeah.
right on time. And in fact, I often share, and I think this happens for a lot of people. I feel more alive, vibrant, invigorated now at midlife than I ever did in my 20s, ever.
100%. Oh my gosh, I'm so with you.
So excited about this.
Yes.
And so when you hear these things about, oh, you know, are you shifting gears and slowing down? I was like, oh, hell no. I am shifting gears and gearing up for the next thing because I am so excited. I cannot wait to get going. I am in the midst of creation, and it's this level of creativity because I do have more space to do it that I feel most alive. And I'm finding, and this is where I'm curious about your experience. I do a lot of interviewing of my audience. Tell me about where you are in life. And what I hear, and you'll all confirm this when I get my DMs when this comes out. I'm in a place where I'm considering my next chapter. I'm in a place where I'm really curious about the possibilities for me in this next phase of my life. I'm thinking about this as I'm at a crossroads. Am I going to continue doing what I've always done, or am I going to follow my heart and do something new? So this concept of a lot of us at midlife really looking at the next chapter, the next phase, the next, whatever you call it, act of life as holding all of this possibility. And how do we walk into it? And I know that it is daunting for a lot of people because it's a sense of like, is it reinvention even possible? I would argue absolutely. Yes, it's so needed if you want it and it's available, but not everyone knows even how to tap into that or where to start. I get a lot of folks that are, I'm curious. I'm just really gathering information and I haven't decided what the next chapter looks like. How are you looking at this next phase of life, the next chapter, and how are you walking through it? What are the ways that you are guiding your own, I would say, renaissance or reinvention, as it were, from whatever was previous for you to what you're experiencing now and what you want to experience? How do you talk about that with your clients? How do you invite them to that conversation? Because I'm so excited about it. Like, to me, this is the most creative time of life because you have the experience, you have the knowledge, you have the sense of self, and you're usually at the place where you're not afraid to talk about it. You're not afraid to
Yes.
what you are, who you are, what you want. It's a much more freeing place to be to experiment. And yet some people don't necessarily know even where to begin. Where do you start these conversations?
Oh, it's such a juicy conversation. Like, we could talk about this for another hour, if not more. So, there are a few things that you said. So, one of them is when you were just speaking, the word that came up to me was yet. When clients say to me, I don't even know where to begin, I go, I know this is going to be super coachy. It's annoying. I want you to say it again with yet at the end. And this is where I always bring in the energy piece because they physically feel a difference. When they say, I don't know where to begin, it's a mental quicksand just being sucked down. Like it's so overwhelming. When they say, I don't know where to begin yet, it's immediately an uplift. There's an immediate physical feeling of, oh, there's hopefulness. There's the light at the end of the tunnel. It's possible. So, yet is, if you're going to choose one word in the entire world, yet, unless you have kids, then
Love it.
maybe is probably the best word ever. My kids ask me anything, maybe it buys me so much time. Okay. Um, One thing I say is going back to what you were talking about with traveling, as I say, all right, so here's where it gets fun instead of daunting and overwhelming. And the fear that's underneath everything is that you're going to make the wrong decision. Because if you really pull it all back, it's really like, I'm going to make the wrong choice. You're not going to make the wrong choice if you know what's right for you. So, the number one thing, any process of coaching that I go through, whether it's coaching groups or coaching one on one, we go through the energy leadership assessment that I have. That's like blood work for your energy levels. It's like it just gives you a baseline, like, here's where you're at and what do you want to change, if at all? And what are you excited about? The next thing are core values. And we hear it all the time in the coaching world. It is so imperative that you physically, not just intellectually know, you physically know what are your conscious core values, not the core values your family thought were important or society is making you feel is important. This is where my like, when I said in the past, like I have a rebellious spirit that might not have made the best choices. This is where I am fully believe all of our parts are really a huge asset to us. We just need to know when to ask them in versus letting them run the show on their own. So this is when I bring in my rebellious and I'm like, hold on a second. Society is not in charge of you. You do not, no way. So let's just slow down and get clear on what core values really matter to you, not what you think should. So then we go through a whole sensation feeling of dropping into what the core values are as we narrow them down. What do they feel like? And then they start making choices from that place. Like, what gets you warmer? Like, the game Hot Cold when we were kids. What's warmer? What gets you a little warmer when you're thinking about like a possibility? None of it's happening. It's not set in stone when it leaves your mouth. It's just like a possibility. What happens? So maybe there's a little fear and a little like a voice in your head from someone in your family or society or a teacher that's like, no way, you're never going to be. But underneath that, if you can realize that they're dealing with their own stuff, the intuition is under that. So if you can feel underneath that and go, oh, the voices become like Peanuts adult, like, in the Peanuts, like Snoopy, the adults are like, wow, wow, wow. That's what the voices end up becoming because you get so clear on, oh, that's not even my voice because you start realizing what your voice is. From there, I say, like, try it on for size. So if it's a weekend, I'll say, for size, try on what it would be like if you started choosing to go in that direction. You actually don't have to take any action in that direction, but just act as if you already did start and just see what it feels like. That's it. I break it down super simple because it can be so overwhelming. And it also creates a sense of liberation of like, oh, I do get to choose. Oh, and I can kind of practice this on and I can give it a sense of like what it feels like as a dress rehearsal and then come back and go, okay, this is what I noticed. All right. Well, what will help you feel better about that decision? Does it still feel like something you want to at least pique your interest to move towards? It does, but I'm nervous about this. Great. Let's, so it's like piecemeal. It's not a one overhaul. Um, because I think that's really huge. And there are so many women and men at midlife who've all hit the metrics of society and they still feel hollow and they're still feeling like, but I did everything I was supposed to do. And
We
why do
checked
I
all the
still,
boxes, and now what?
I checked all the boxes. Now what? So there's consistently a feeling that's a combo of resentment and frustration and guilt. Like there's this cocktail inside underneath, but I should be happy because I have this beautiful family and I had this wonderful life and I still have this wonderful leg. Why do I feel guilty? And then there's like a frustration, like, what the hell? I actually did what I was supposed to do. and I was guaranteed this feeling and this outcome, and it didn't work. So then that's when we really start going back to like, let's redefine what does success look like for you in this next leg of your path? What does it look like? What does it feel like? Let's just redefine it. You can always redefine it. But I do believe that having someone with you who, again, is not having a loved one is amazing for many reasons. Like having a multiple, I don't think you're supposed to just have one person. I don't think you're just supposed to have a coach and no loved one, and not a loved one and no coach or therapist or whatever. You're supposed to have a gaggle of people. I feel like, it takes a village to raise a child. We hear all the time. It takes a village to raise a human.
Right. Well,
It
in
doesn't.
fact, adult reinvention is no easy thing either because you can know what you want. You can go through I know how it feels. I know this feels right, but be stuck in the actual execution,
Well,
actually living it.
totally. Well, and also just to close this out, like what you were referencing before when you knew what you wanted, but you were scared to say it and you had the approval of, family members. That is also in these moments when our inner child goes bananas. They're
Mm,
like freaking out. So one of my favorite exercises that I do with people is I call it bring your inner child to work day. And I get them used to, they can take a picture of themselves when they were a kid, or they can just visually remember whatever works. But they have them like, come on, you're going to come with me. You're going to see what it's like to do this next chapter. We're going to start looking for, because that is your, in a, in the most simplistic terms, that is your guide. The next chapter of your life is really probably what you've always been wanting to do, and maybe you weren't doing it, So being able to tap into, like, talk to that inner child part of you and go, let's just come with me. It makes them feel safe. So they're not going to feel scared. And then they're going to get excited and you're going to get random sparks. It's like you're going on a scavenger hunt together and it becomes more exciting. It's like there's a phrase, and I can't remember who to attribute it to, but you have a choice to lean into the anticipation or the apprehension.
mm. But you get to choose.
Get to choose. It's a choice. It is a choice.
I love
And
that.
it's different for everybody.
I love that. Okay, favorite topic of mine, perfectionism. A lot of us have, and as I call it, a recovering perfectionist, and it does rear its head from time to time. Sometimes I'm unaware that's even happening until I'm in the middle of something going, huh, that's what's happening here. That's definitely a familiar ground for me. Let's kind of dial that back and find a new path. Let's talk about what perfectionism really is. When you have people saying, I am just a perfectionist, what is really coming to mind for you as a coach? What are you thinking?
I I don't think it's one thing. I feel like the first thing I'm thinking is making room for a question. Is to ask them something like, well, when you say that, what does perfectionism mean? That's one of my first questions because we all have an idea. A lot of us think of it like Stepford Wifey, or we may think of like the super manicured yard, or, the beginning of Weeds, if anyone watched that Mary Louise Parker show back in the day.
Yeah.
Um, it's also our own preconceived idea of stereotypical perfectionism. So I always say, like, what does that mean? What
Right.
does perfectionism mean? And it does open a lot because perfectionism is not one thing. I learned this from Catherine Morgan Schaffler, who wrote the book, The Perfectionist Guide to Losing Control. You and I have spoken about it. And she looks at, and there are, and I don't know if she created it or if this is out in the world somewhere, but there's 5 different types of perfectionists. And I first heard about this from my old therapist, who I love dearly, who he said to me, the manicured lawn is what we think of when we think of perfectionism. The neighbor whose lawn is overgrown could be just as much of a perfectionist, but they're so scared of doing it wrong that they don't even try. And I was like,
Wow.
And, right away, I had so
Thought
much
about it that
compassion for,
way.
and it was like a fictitious neighbor, but my heart went out to that person. I was like, "Oh my god," like, it just creates this sense
Get
of
that.
compassion, right?
I get that
Yes,
deeply.
it's so right on, like, we have I mean, the funny thing is, like, my lawn, I mow it like a drunk monkey. Like, I use it as a time. I have no perfectionism about my lawn. I'm just, like, picking up poop with my dog's poop, and I'm, like, listening to a podcast or music, and I forgot a spot, and I turn around, like, I use it as, like, my place to just go buck wild, but I have other areas that I do lean towards perfectionism, and I feel like it's again, a yes, and. It's this
It's a
idea
yes then.
of how can you make your perfectionism, which is what Catherine talks about in her book, but how can you make it more of a superpower and more adaptive than maladaptive? The reason that we all cringe at perfectionism or take pride in it really is the pride is more of the adaptive, but the maladaptive is the when we're looking at it like, oh, the perfectionism is debilitating. There's so much
It's
shame in it.
and it's exhausting.
It's exhausting and there's no end to it. So I also would create a character. I would say, okay, when you think of yourself as a perfectionist, what is the part? Let's talk to that part. And then we create a character. So it might be like perfectionistic Pete, or it might be perfectionistic Pauline, or whatever. And then you are in, it's almost like you're peeling off a particle of clothing and there's more room for you to reach your higher self when you see a part of yourself because it's not cramping your mental. So then you immediately again are like, oh, honey. And so there's more self compassion. The one visual I'll leave your listeners with is I always think of, and this is a shout out in honor of Matthew Perry, all of us were so
Oh,
heartbroken universally with that. What a love and light for our world. I used to, and I still do, use the scene in Friends, the one where Joey puts on all of his clothes and is like, "Could I be wearing any more clothes?" And he busts into Monica and Rachel's apartment. And
oh,
I'd use that picture in presentations, and I still use that visual. It's like, this is your mind with other people's thoughts.
mm.
It's not your thoughts. So when you take them all off, and it immediately creates a sense of levity and play, which is what I consistently aim to bring in because I can get super heavy. I have very ups and downs, like many people probably who are listening may have a tendency to get very depressed and very anxious and very excited. And at the same time, when you can bring levity into it and normalize it and create this shared human experience of like, oh my gosh, we do all do that and we do all feel that. And how we allow ourselves the space to feel more whole over perfect is so unique to us. So it's this universe, it's the whole idea of like stories are personal, the lessons are universal.
So somebody who may be holding on to perfectionistic tendencies and it is preventing them from moving forward with
Yeah.
this. Because I think that that's often the case. I mean, you see younger people with more energy overdo it in order to people please and be quote unquote perfect. And then as we get older, we can't even start because if you can't do it perfect, why would you do it? Or you can't
Yes.
make a decision. But you at least recognize the energy that was involved in doing it perfect before is probably not there in the same way. So I'm going to just focus in on because I know more of the folks that it's hard to get off first base.
Yeah.
As they see it as just being daunting. How can they start to look at this differently and make choices to let go of let in the messy? We talked a lot about this in the world of Kathy Heller of really taking messy action. And I know that for the first few times I heard it was like, ew, that doesn't feel right. But we will say the more I've gotten used to the term, oh, giving myself permission to explore without necessarily going too far.
So you just hit a key word, which I think will probably resonate with your audience more than messy.
Hmm.
Majority of perfectionists do not like messy. And even though messy perfectionist is one of the perfectionists in Catherine's book, explore. That is the operative word. If
Yeah.
it's looked at as more of an exploration, going back to your word of expansion, it creates that sense of expansion. It creates that sense of excitement. It creates a sense of like hands rubbed together, like what's going to happen. It's like the energy that's different that's behind. And this is an exercise that you can do. So if you're okay, so I have two that are coming very clearly. You're wanting to do something, it's new. You keep getting debilitating paralysis, right? Analysis paralysis. Two things. It could be getting a great quote for sure. I get it. If you're a writer, Anne Lamott, who I absolutely love, says shitty first drafts. Like everybody writes a shitty first draft. You just got to get it out and then that's it. And that helps normalize it. However, there are two other. One is what if? So to write out all of the what ifs that you're terrified of. Like what if it can, and it doesn't matter. It's so subjective to you. It's nothing's too big or small, or I can't believe I care about what someone in high school thinks, or I can't believe I care. Doesn't matter. Because if you keep it in, it's just going to clog the pipe. That's right. I always say it's like it's like when you have gross, filthy hair in your pipes in your plumbing. That's exactly what the thoughts are doing. And I make it gross because people are like, I want that out. I'm like, awesome. So let's write out. So you take a piece of paper, if you like a classic legal, you do the T, and at the top you write what if. And you write all the things that you're like, what if this is going to happen? Oh my gosh, all the things giving you anxiety. And then you take a breath. And then on the other side, you shift to the excitement of what if. Like, I just got chills just even thinking like someone wants to start a podcast, right? And they go through all the debilitating what ifs and they're heavy and they're cringy and all that stuff. And then all of a sudden they take a breath and they shift to what if. So I will say to clients, physically turn yourself, your body in a different direction. Like turn yourself towards the terrifying what if, then physically turn yourself towards the light of the fork in the road. And there's probably many other forks and paths, but what if this brings in so many amazing opportunities? What if I end up, speaking to people that spark so much amazing collaboration? What if someone hears this and their life is saved? What if, and then you rip the paper, you safely burn the what if side that is not serving you, and you pin the what if side that is where you're going to see it. You can take it further and you can lean in just like we did before with your traveling, the seal the feel. Go through each what if and go through that entire experience through the senses, through the feeling. It's that reticular activating system, right? That like sees what it is before you're actually experiencing it. So you can expand for that joy, like you were saying. So that's huge. That piece is huge. And the second is, and I share this with clients who come to me for presenting, for being more visible, for being on camera, on the mic for podcasts, on stages, whatever, is in addition to what if, who are you doing it for?
Hmm.
And if you think of a cause of who you're doing it for, if you think of heart centered, I mean, I'll look at it like sometimes I get behind the podcast or I might get like, oh, I got to get on Instagram. I don't know what I'm going to say. Or I might do the podcast. I might just feel tired. I might feel nervous. And if I can think of either a client or the general population of heart centered high achievers, and I say, oh my gosh, there is a heart centered high achiever out there who has such a beautiful, passionate soul and is so stuck in their head. And we need her light and we need his light. I'm on that mic. Nobody can stop me from getting on the mic. If I do it for my kids, if I do it for my future self, if I do it for my past self, if I do it for my grandmother, it doesn't matter who you're doing it for. It's just someone to you. And you can even put your hands on your heart and say, share with me one person I can dedicate this to, or a group of people I can dedicate this to. And it'll come. And now your energy is going out instead of crushing you in.
I love it.
Yeah.
Kristy, this has been so fascinating. And
It
I
flew
love
by.
your energy.
Aw,
We need to
same.
do more of this, and we will.
We will.
so many
No
different
doubt.
places to collaborate now. But tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, so they can find me on Instagram at Kristy Mandour, and they can find me at sowtospeak.com, SOWTOSPEAK.com. And I'm going to be coming up on November 28th with a free 2-hour workshop that is sharing my favorite tips on how to get out of your head and back into your life, your heart. And it's perfect because it's like in the thick of the holidays, DAZE. It's the daisy days of the holidays.
So we will include links to find Kristy and listen to her podcast in the show notes for sure. Please do look her up. She's going to have information on this class on the 28th. So we'll make sure that everybody has access to that as well. And I just want to thank you again. I love being with you. I love spending time with you. And I am holding my cup up here of tea saying, cheers to the beginning of more really great conversations. Thank you so much for
Absolutely.
coming.
Michelle, thank you so much. This was fantastic.